Welcome to Garden Delights. I'm Susan Howington, Family Consumer Science Agent with the Henry County Cooperative Extension, partnership with the University of Georgia. Today we're going to talk about enchilada soup, and we're going to be making it with chicken. And also we'll hear from Frank Hancock, our Agriculture and Natural Resource Agent. He's going to talk more about gardening and getting that garden ready, because you think about it, it's going to be here before we turn around. We'll see you back in just a little bit on Garden Delights. Welcome back to Garden Delights. Today we're talking about chicken enchilada soup. It is going to be really good and tasty, but let's talk about the nutrition part of it, which is so important, because when we're putting our meals together, we want to make sure that we're feeding our family with some good nutrition and make sure they're getting what they need from what we're eating. This recipe is very simple, but let's talk about a little bit what's in the recipe. We have our corn and our tomatoes, and you know, we're using canned for this recipe, but I do want to tell you, if you can use fresh or frozen, that's even better. But we do know that our corn and our tomatoes, the one good thing about those, they're saturated fat-free, they're cholesterol-free, and if you buy the right cans that say low sodium or no sodium, you're doing even better. These both will give you a little bit of vitamin A and a little bit of vitamin C, so those are going to be good for us as far as our corn and our tomatoes. Now let's move to our black beans, and I'm using black beans for this recipe, and you know that black beans are going to be very high in fiber. We know about a cup of these black beans will give us about 15 grams of fiber, which is really, really good. And we also know that it's going to give us a lot of good protein. So if you're a vegetarian and you're looking for something to eat without the meat, this is your protein that you're going to get from this recipe. Also, we're going to add a little bit of chicken to the recipe, and we know that chicken's going to give us that protein. We also know that chicken is also unsaturated fat-free, and we say it's a little bit of the fat-free part of it, which is a good thing because it does help against heart diseases, and that's what we're looking for when we're preparing our meals. We want to look for things that are good for our bodies. So just to kind of tell you a little bit about the big things that are going into our crock pot for our enchilada soup, these are the things that I really want to point out as far as our nutrition goes. Now, when we're buying our cans selection at the store, most cans nowadays have the date on them. But there's some that are hard to read, and some of them may not have the date. So you do want to make sure you're checking on the date. You want to put those cans in your refrigerator. If you're cooking, you want to pour it in there, you know, and you want to put something in there, that's fine. But if you're going to store those cans on your shelf for a long period of time, check the dates. It's very important that you either write the date on there or make sure you can see the date. And make sure when you're buying your cans that you don't see any dents, because you don't want to buy anything that has a dent in it, because we don't want any bacteria growing in whatever you're buying, and you can't see that. So that's something very important when you're buying our cans. Now if you're checking out for your frozen items, that's even better, because you can look for the sodium intake and all that, and that's to me very important, because I did try to look for things that were no sodium or low sodium, because we want to keep our sodium in our diet low, because we tend to eat too much sodium. Now this is very important when we're buying our cans, but when we're storing our cans, I teach a lot of food safety classes, and what's important for the folks to remember, and it's hard for us to remember because we get in a hurry when we buy our groceries and we just want to get our groceries and put them up and put our cans up, but you want to look at the dates, because we talk about first in, first out. So when I'm buying my cans, I want to make sure that I'm putting my new cans to the back. If I'll have a lot of cans of tomato, then I want to put my new ones to the back, bring my other old ones to the front, so you're using the first in, first out. And the same thing with restaurants. We're hoping that's what they're doing too, because you are going to save your money. And what I really hate with myself is when I'm looking and I realize that a can has expired because I didn't follow good practices as far as the first in, first out. So you do want to make sure that your storage, you're looking at your cans and you're making sure the dates are in, and put those new things to the back. Take a little bit of time when you're going to the grocery store to do that, because that's really important. And other things to think about is buying it fresh. I know this is the winter months, and a lot of times we don't have fresh things at our home, but if you can make these type things when it's fresh corn, We have a lot of stored tomatoes at our home that are frozen. So I could have, if I had taken the time to take those tomatoes out and roasted those tomatoes and use them just for this recipe also. So be thinking about ways you can do that. The chicken broth, this chicken is pre-cooked, so if you take the chicken broth, you can reuse that chicken broth, which is ideal because then you know if it's low in sodium because you didn't put any sodium in them. So keep that all in mind when you're putting all this together and putting nutritional meals together for your family. What are you doing for the best for them as far as your sodium, cholesterol-free, protein? All those play a big part in our nutrition. So when we come back, we'll hear from Frank Hancock, our agriculture and natural resource. He's going to tell you how to get that garden in shape. And then we'll come back and we'll put this recipe together.
Okay, it's getting to be winter time here, and so this is a good time for you to plan your garden for next year. If you don't have a garden and you want to have a garden, then now's the time to sit down and work out your plan. You need to pick your garden space close to the house. The closer to the house it is, the more convenient it is for you to go out there and work in the garden. I've seen people put their garden back on the back side of their property, and you just don't go out there that much. It needs to be close to the house. Then I go out there and I can hoe a few weeds and I can do whatever I need to do in the garden. Also, it needs to be close to a water supply. These vegetables are going to need some water, about 1.5 inches a week. We want to get that planned so that we soaker hose being the best. We don't want to water our leaves and things to give a place for fungus and that sort of thing to get started in the garden. You need a place that gets about 8 hours of sunshine a day, 8 to 12. That would be probably on the south side of your property. Needs to be away from trees because trees are going to shade it. And not only trees are going to shade it, but tree roots will invade the garden also. So away from trees. You don't want to have it in a low spot where water stands. You want it to be a well-drained place. You don't want the slope to be too excessive because you'll be dealing with erosion when it rains and the dirt washes off the side of the hill. So fairly level, well-drained. If you have a low spot and you want to put the garden there, then consider raised beds and build it up so that low spot doesn't saturate your roots with water. You need to do a soil test in the area. If you've got a lot of grass and weeds in the area, you probably want to go ahead and try to get rid of them. You can use a little Roundup, especially Bermuda grass. Bermuda grass is really tough to get rid of once it gets established in the garden. Its roots go really deep, and even with your hoe, it's hard to take care of that. And the things that you would use chemical-wise to get rid of it will also kill your garden. So you kind of deal with that ahead of time. Do a soil sample, get the fertility levels right. Close to a water supply, we said that being close to the house will put you close to your water supply. And then you plan on what vegetables you want to grow, how much you need. You can figure out, you can grow a lot of vegetables in a small area, and so just get your plan. University of Georgia's got some pretty good literature on vegetable gardens. That this particular one is growing vegetables organically, but the first part of it goes through a series of how to select the location for your garden and how to prepare your garden and those kind of things. So the south side of the house, plenty of sunshine, close to the house, plenty of water. Those are the things that you need to consider. And these brochures also tell you when you can plant what, and don't plant your tall vegetables like corn and okra and that stuff where it would be shading some of your shorter vegetables that might need a little more sunshine. Also think about your long season things like okra, where you pick okra right on up till frost, and you go out there just about every other day to pick it. Put it in a place to itself so that your other vegetables that'll be shorter season vegetables, once you pick them, you want to plow that place up and plant something else, so you don't need these longer season vegetables like tomatoes. Tomatoes pretty much make all season long, so you just kind of think about that. Think about crop rotation, where you don't have to plant the same thing in the same spot every year. Think about cover crops so that you can build your soil up and get that soil rich. We've talked in previous programs about having good soil with plenty of organic matter in it, and those kind of things. And in the cold weather, it's good to sit inside and figure all that out, so when springtime comes, you're ready to jump on it. And I think now we're about ready to go inside and see what Susan's fixing.
We're going to be making enchilada soup, and we're going to be putting chicken in it. So if you're vegetarian, you can leave the chicken out, but we're going to put the chicken in today. And I want to talk a little bit about the crock pot. We're going to be using the crock pot to do our recipe. And you know, the crock pot has been around, I guess, since the early 70s, so that's about 40-something years. And it's still moving full speed ahead, and people are still buying it. And I think a lot of times I think about the working moms. This is their way of coming home and knowing they've got a meal for their family when they come home. I hope you're going to realize that this crock pot can do a lot of stuff to you, for you also. The thing I want to show you today is I'm using a liner for my crock pot. And the thing I like about this is I'm always looking for a way to clean up easy and fast. So this is, to me, saving my time, because once this soup is done, I can just lift this up, put a twist tie around it, and my soup is going to be ready to go in the refrigerator. And so that's a saving of not having to wash out this pot. You know, I may have to wipe it out just a little bit, but it doesn't have all the ingredients stuck to it and everything. So it's a lifesaver. So if you never used a liner for your crock pot, try to use one. You'll like it. It's a wonderful little thing to add to it. So let's talk about our chicken enchilada soup. We're going to take some cooked chicken, and it's about 2 cups. And once you cook your chicken, you shred it, because you want to shred it to where it's easy to eat in the soup. This is 1 can of corn, 1 can of roasted fire tomatoes. This is 2 cans of black beans. We're also going to put a small can of green chilies in it. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of minced garlic, and we're going to add 1 teaspoon of cumin too. And then we're also going to use a large can of enchiladas, the sauce part. So it's the largest can, which I guess it's about 15 ounces. You'll have to look, but when you measure it out, it's going to come about to 2 cups of the enchilada sauce. And then our chicken broth is about 3 cups is what you want to get. And if you think about it, when you're cooking your chicken, you can use the same chicken broth from that chicken, which is very important. So let's put it all together. And what I want to do is put my liquid into the crock pot first. So I'm going to go ahead and add it. And you can see it doesn't, this liner just stays in there so good as far as not coming out. I'm going to add the enchilada sauce. And then I am going to start adding the other ingredients. And I'm going to put in the beans first. So let's put those in, because that's my biggest container. I'm also going to put in my chicken, which is about 2 cups, and it's shredded. All right, and I'm going to put in my corn, which is 1 can, and the corn and the black beans, they need to be rinsed. Both of them do, and because you want to get all the liquid that's in that can off of, so you want to rinse them off. And also, if you're using low sodium from your beans or your corn, This will also help them because it will take some of the other sodium. If you're buying total sodium, it'll take some of the sodium off of those beans and corn too, which is a good thing because you don't want to have all that sodium into this soup. And I'm not going to end up adding any sodium to the soup either. This is the fire roasted tomatoes, and you do not drain those. You want the liquid from the tomatoes. And then you're going to add your green chilies, which is the small can of those. And I'm saving the best thing for last. You're going to add that 1 teaspoon of garlic. And you know I love garlic, so if I can figure out a way to put the garlic in, I am. And then 1 teaspoon of the cumin. So you're going to put that in for a little bit of spice, a little bit of kick. And this is spicy, believe me, it's spicy. And what I'm going to do now is, the last thing that I left is one of my favorite things. This time of year, you just can't beat green onions. So I'm going to add about 8 green onions to this recipe. So I'm going to go ahead and chop those up. And when you get ready to put these onions in the crock pot, if you'll just keep it on a low, and my onions are trying to roll off my cutting board, and I've got to have every one of them because it does make it very tasty. You'll want to, it's still rolling off. We'll want to make sure that we are getting some of the green part of those onions in there because that's going to make it even tastier. And if you like green onions as much as I do, you may even want to add, keep a couple of extras behind or buy a couple of extras, or, and I'm going to go into the green part, but you could stop at a certain point on these green onions and save a little bit of the green part. Like for instance, this part right here, you could take this, chop it up and save it out, and then when you serve your soup, sprinkle a little bit of those green onions on top. Then it'll add a little bit of color also to it. But I'm going to chop just a little bit more of the green part because I do want them in the soup. It makes a great color to it, but it also makes it very, very tasty. So we're going to add just a little bit more of the green. And the green onions this time of year are the best. They're usually a cool season type of onion. And to me, I always say buy things when they're in peak. They're going to be cheaper, but they're also going to taste their best. So those are my green onions. And like I said, that's about 8 of them. So I'm going to scoop these up and try not to make a big mess and get these into the crock pot. And it's already looking good. And I know once I stir it, it's going to smell really good too. See if I can get them in here. Get just a little bit more. And if you don't like green onions, you know, you could use red onions or you could use white onions. But I really like the green onions, so I'm going to try my best to use them as much as possible because when they're in season, they're at their best. And usually this time of year, you're going to see really good deals on green onions, but also in the spring when it's cool also, you'll see a good deal of the green onions too. So I'm just going to stir this around, and if you could just smell this, it smells so good. And it's also so colorful. Just everything mixed together. It makes a great soup. And I know that it's going to be a recipe that you'll want to put in your family. It's hearty for this time of year when you're looking for something warm. This is a wonderful way to come home and have supper ready to go. Now, what you're going to do, we've got it in the crock pot, and depending on your day, normally it's about 3 to 4 hours, and you put in your crock pot and you put it on low speed. But if you want to go longer than that, you can, as long as it's on low. So if you're working all day and you want to come home and you want to keep it on low, that's still going to be fine because it's enough liquid in that soup that you can do that. So just remember, it doesn't take very long. Now let's say that when you're in your hurry and you want to make this soup very fast, you still do the same thing that I just talked about. But you could put it in a pot on the oven and cook it in a pot for 30 minutes, boiling, get it warm, get everything warm, get the chicken all, because you want that chicken having some of that enchilada sauce taste to it. But you could do that to speed up the recipe. So there's two versions. You could do the crock pot, or you could speed it up depending on your family and what you're trying. You could put it in a pot also. This is so tasty. It smells really good, so we're gonna let it cook for that amount of time, and then once we cook it, it's ready to go, ready to serve for your family. When we come back, we'll be tasting the chicken enchilada soup. Welcome back to Garden Delights. We have Frank with us, and we're going to be tasting that chicken enchilada soup. Frank, it's good.
Now, before you get started, we really can't do this without talking about Tamara. You know, Tamara, her last name was, I can't remember here, Hanakusan. And she's a Lithuanian who had a son named Irving. And she used to send Irving to the bakery. When they turned the bakery off, it stayed hot for a long time as it cooled down. So she would send her stew by way of Irving, and he would put it in the bakery. And then on Sunday afternoon, they'd go get it, and she didn't have to cook on Sunday because the cooling down oven at the bakery would cook it. So Irving, when they moved to the United States, he changed his name to Naxon, because just like I couldn't say the last name, so that was a good move on his part. But in 1936, he applied for a patent on a cooker that would do that slow cooking, like his mother had sent him over to do. And in 1940, that patent got issued. And in 1950, he went in production with the Naxon Beanery. That's what it was called, and he produced that from 1950 to 1970. When he retired, he sold the company, and they started calling it a crock pot.
There you go.
And from there, it got developed and sold through a couple of different companies. But the good news is today, you can actually order a crock pot with your favorite ball team logo on it.
I know that. Isn't that really neat?
This is a University of Georgia crock pot right here. You can order that thing online. So I thought that was, you know, for our useless information for today, I thought that we should talk about that, because you can't talk about crock pot cooking without talking about Irving and his mother, Tamara.
Very good.
And
And you know, I bet you've sewed a lot of crock pots for all different football seasons too.
I'm ready to eat now.
All right, all right. Well, let's try it. And also, I didn't mention this earlier, but this soup will also freeze very well. So if you're making it and you want to freeze it for later, you can. So that's a good thing about soups. A lot of them can be frozen. And sometimes you can make this ahead of time and then freeze it. And to me, that just works out even better, because then you got a meal later on for you to eat. So what do you think? Oh, you know what, Frank? Put your bowl back down. I got to do one more thing. We got to zazz it up a little bit.
All right.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of cheese, because I think about enchilada, and you think about enchiladas in general, and you got to have a little bit of cheese.
It was pretty
and you know
good.
me, I love my cheese.
It was pretty good without the cheese, but
I'm
now
always
I know
looking.
it's going to be better.
Yeah. It's not too hot, is it?
It's just right.
All right.
That would be, on a cold day, that would really just be something you'd need to be eating.
That's pretty good. I think that we put together a good little meal there.
And it would not be hard for everybody watching to do this, because over 85% of the households in America have a crock pot.
That's exactly right.
So
That's pretty neat.
all they got to do is to mix it up and start cooking.
That's right. That's
And
exactly
call
right.
me, I'll come over and help them eat it.
There you go. There you go. Wonderful recipe. If you could just smell it, it smells so good, so tasty, spicy. So put this on your list to buy the next time you're going to the grocery store. Great nutrition for you also. Check out the website. You'll see the recipe on that website. and we'll see you back on Garden Delights.